The ground squirrel comes from the family Squirrelidae, which includes squirrels, chipmunks, and marmot. There are two types of squirrels in the Central Coast region, the California ground squirrel and the western gray squirrel. The western gray squirrel, like the name, is gray in color and has a fuller tail, rather than the California ground squirrel is brown and has a smaller, thinner tail. The western gray squirrels are fur-bearing mammals, and the California ground squirrels are a non-game animal. To help with identification, if you see a squirrel climbing a tree, it will be the western gray squirrel. California ground squirrels will not be climbing up trees, but instead they burrow in the ground. California ground squirrels have a wide spread throughout majority of all habitats in their early stages. They tend to be found in open, disturbed areas like alongside roads, croplands, and grazed meadows. They can be found all the way up to 11,000 feet of elevation. California ground squirrels are omnivores that feed on anything from seeds, nuts, fruits, bulbs, fungi, and stems, which explains why you'll find them in croplands. They also feed on some insects and bird eggs. They are known for digging up plants and foraging on the ground in shrubs and trees, which is where they'll store their food for inactive periods. California ground squirrels need to have coverage. They'll burrow themselves in soil, and the burrows are often near rocky areas, trees, and logs. These burrows are very elaborate systems, with 6 to 20 entrances. In size, the tunnels are averaging 35 feet and range from 3 to 138 feet. They will cover ground around 450-foot radius from their burrow. Predators cause the squirrels to remain close to their burrow, but that doesn't mean some squirrels won't take a risk to travel outside their comfort zones, moving from 1 to 5 miles into new areas. They can live singly or in a small colony of one or more families. These animals are not very territorial, so there's lots of overlaps with one another. The population density relies on the resources available. A population number will increase if it is in a heavily grazed area with high food production and visibility. The ground squirrel is known to be an important prey for many predators. They are diurnal animals, meaning that they will be found in daylight. If the food is limited to the population, ground squirrels can become torpid, hibernating when resources are low and temperatures are extreme. Timing of everything varies with individuals, populations, weather, and habitat. Moving on to reproduction, the reproduction will begin in early spring, and they will reproduce 1 litter per year. 1 litter holds about 6 to 8 babies in it. The gestation will last 30 days, and they will be weaned for 55 days. Maturity is hit 7 to 8 months later. They can live up to 4 to 5 years, but the average is 1 to 2 years. Unfortunately for us, they are the #1 vertebrate pest in California. Consisting of both direct and indirect damage, they can eat our crops and burrow near our roots, and this leads to erosion. We cannot put a price on how much damage they cost us, since it is everywhere. On the bright side, they are a non-game animal, and this means we can take them whenever we want in any legal manner. To control them, and integrating a management plan requires being able to categorize them based on target population levels. We must compare annual fluctuation versus average population density. We may either use high-density tactics, meaning used to reduce large numbers in a short period of time and it's easy to see results, or low-density tactics, which is effective when the squirrels are harder to find. The key to IPM is to have a balance of high and low density tactics and be able to maintain the density tactics to keep average populations well below economic levels. You do not want to reach an economic threshold. The key keeps things easier and affordable. So, how do we kill a ground squirrel, or should I say manage them? Well, if you're looking for a high density tactic, you can use toxins. A common toxin is an acute toxin called zinc phosphide, a treated grain. Instead of toxins, we can use a type of poison baits called anticoagulants. Anticoagulants basically causes internal bleeding inside the animal. There are 2 types of anticoagulants, first generation and second. First generation means it requires multiple feedings. Some common first-generation anticoagulants are warfarin, diphenhydramine, and chlorophenol. Second generation means it requires a single feeding. It's a more acute approach. And some typical types of second-generation anticoagulants are brotaficone and brotadilone. These are typically used around buildings. To use toxins, you can use a poison bait station for ground squirrels. It is important that you pre-bait them with non-poison grain until they start feeding. And then once they start, you will replace it with poison grain. Make sure you monitor the bait station to remove spilled grain and to see when the feeding stops. You want to avoid any chance of poisoning non-targets, meaning anything other than the California ground squirrel. Just keep in mind that using the toxin control method, there could be negative consequences, like hurting non-target animals, resistant issues, and environmental damage. However, there's another high tactic approach, and this is through burrow destruction, like using the rotinator.
Fire in the hole!
You can also use shooting and trapping for higher density. You may use trapping for low density as well, tactics along with predators. Predators usually are more useful in spring population drop. A coyote can eat up to 9 to 10 rodents per day. That's a lot of control. A common trap used for squirrels is the conibear trap. Well, without further ado, Manny and Giovanni will be teaching us how to use a conibear trap.
Hey guys, my name is Manny. Today I'm going to show you guys how to set up a conibear trap. What you want to do is you want to squeeze this here and flip this over, and this little fork, you want to put it on the tip of your fingers, and then we have like this hook here. You want to hook it up in the middle, then you can let go and it's set, ready to go.
Nice job. Action.
How's it going, guys? So this is a squirrel hole that we just found. We're gonna set this conibear trap here. The hole, before we put this rock here, the hole was too wide and the squirrel can get to the sides of it, which you don't want because that means it can escape. And these squirrels are pretty smart, so they know kind of how to do that. So we're gonna put the rock here so that there's only one way to go, and it's right through the trap. We gotta give it a little bit of room on this side for this little latch right here to open when it does go through the middle. So we're gonna leave it right here, we're gonna put a stake in it, and hopefully tomorrow we got dinner.
Personally, I'd rather have steak and lobster for dinner, Giovanni, but that was funny. So back to business. With every control method, there is a pro and con. It just all depends on what you are comfortable with. My group and I decided it would be a good idea to get someone from the industry's perspective of what it's like to work with management practices with ground squirrels. Of course, what better person to interview than Cal Poly's very own Prof. Jack? Please state who you are and your agricultural background.
Okay, my name is Jack Rabin. I was on the faculty of Rutgers University in New Jersey for 34 years. I'm a UC Davis graduate school graduate in vegetable crops breeding. For 11 of those years, I was a vegetable crops farm advisor, and for the next 22 years, I was the director of all the campuses, off-campus research farms, on-campus greenhouses, and one of those duties was directing its wildlife damage control programs.
Awesome.
So I have a lot of experience in deer damage management on farms, and in fact wrote a report in New Jersey in 1999, which made me testify in front of the state legislature in the year 2000, and New Jersey passed a law based on my work called the Community-Based Deer Management Act, which gave municipalities the legal right to have sharpshooters with silencer-mounted night vision scoped rifles bait deer in urban areas and shoot them because people were running into them in their cars, they're transmitting Lyme disease, they were chewing up landscapes, and we mated that program to donating all the meat that came out of that to feeding the hungry to church soup kitchens. So we had a social justice component, and we had an agriculture and community protection component. And so I actually testified to a state legislature on wildlife damage and wrote lots of work on that. And as a result of that, a year later, I was sued by PETA, and I had a 3-year lawsuit against me by people for the ethical treatment of animals, because work that I had done led to a state law passed in New Jersey, which then was a form of deer management that they didn't approve of. And that method of deer control was actually used at airports because people don't want deer running in front of an airplane that's landing, and they were doing it at Philadelphia Airport and Newark Airport, and it was a big project that I work on. So I spent 12 or 14 years in wildlife damage management, and that is part of my background, so it's interesting that you're interviewing me.
Awesome. So you said most of your work has to do with deer. Have you
Yes.
had any squirrels affecting the livelihood that you've been working in?
We did not have ground squirrels until I moved out here. All of our squirrels were tree nesting squirrels. We had voles, we have moles, and in fact, all of these ground squirrels in California, they are rodents, and rodents need to chew to live, right? Not just to chew to get calories, they need to chew to keep their teeth size, right? And when they do that, they injure crops. They girdle trees, they tear up landscapes, and one of the things, because I also worked in turf management, and I'm not doing that here now, ground squirrels tearing up youth soccer fields. If you have a soccer field that a municipality or a city school system has spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on to have quality play for young people to stay healthy, and then they go play soccer on that field, and where the ground squirrels create their holes, a young person trips, falls, twists her ankle, and ends up in the hospital ER and injured and can't play, because that's one of the downside impacts of ground squirrels. So it's not just an impact on a fruit tree, it's an impact on quality of life for other people. And to me, that makes California ground squirrels a pesky mammal pest.
Of course. So what control methods have you heard of, or that you know of or use, that you think will mostly benefit us in California?
Your toolbox is limited by state law and state regulation, but all the tools always break down to a couple of things. One, you can do exclusion, where you physically keep the animal out of where you want it to be. You can poison them, you can shoot them, you can capture and relocate them. There's only so many tools in the toolbox, and it's a limited number of tools, and they're well known, and you apply the tools at the time and place where they're acceptable to society.
Gotcha. Thank you. So my last question for you is, when you hear the word squirrel, what do you think of?
I think of a rodent. I think of something with piles of crusty soil on cultivated crop fields, and I've watched these ground squirrels chew cauliflower and broccoli crops in a circle around when they come out of their holes. I think about animal feces on sidewalks. I do understand that different human beings value wildlife resources differently in the world we live in. So to an agriculturist like me, if I'm a fruit grower, not only are the squirrels a pest, but their feces are a food safety problem. To a person who has a squirrel feeder on their back deck and actually feeds the squirrels, to them the presence of that wildlife is, they feel that they're helping the environment. It brings them great satisfaction and comfort. So there is an area of wildlife management called the human dimensions of wildlife management. And that means we have to try and satisfy different people's notions of how they value that resource while keeping it away from damaging agriculture and landscapes and people in the community. So when I think of squirrel, I just think it's another rodent, but other people don't think the same way.
Awesome. Thank you.
We hope you have gained new knowledge regarding ground squirrel management. And remember these tactics if you or your loved ones are facing a rodent problem.
Squirrel!